every single running back that you should be starting or sitting going into week 11 of the fantasy football season. We are going to be talking about 28 teams, 14 matchups, over 45 running backs going into this week. So let's not waste any more times. 4 teams on a bye: the Falcons, the Colts, the Patriots, and the Saints. So essentially, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, if you want to throw him in there, Ramondre Stevenson, and Alvin Kamara. So make sure you plan accordingly as you go throughout your week here. And starting off with the Thursday night matchup here, a good divisional rival game. The Bengals versus the Baltimore Ravens. The over-under is 45.5 going into this week. This should be a high-scoring Thursday night game. I would also say probably arguably the best Thursday night game so far we have on schedule. I could be wrong. I don't remember all the 9 matchups or 10 matchups that we had so far on Thursday night, but this should be a great game. Starting off on the Bengals side of the ball here, you obviously start Joe Moneybags Mixon. These last 3 games, he's been finding the end zone and been averaging over that double-digit fantasy points that we would like. 20 points in week 8, 17 in week 9, 12.5 fantasy points this past week against the Houston Texans. You're going to start him with confidence. You're not starting anyone else in this backfield. On the Baltimore Ravens side of the ball here, I do have Gus Edwards as a must start. I do believe he's going to continue to produce and do what he is doing. I mean, if you look at the last 4 games, he has scored 7 touchdowns in the last 4 games. I mean, that is crazy. In one game alone, he scored 3. In Seattle, he scored 2, and he's been scoring a touchdown in one touchdown in every other game, obviously from week 7 to 10. He's also been averaging that double-digit on fantasy point game as well outside of week 10 this past week against the Cleveland Browns, who technically give up the least amount of points to the fantasy position, but he does find the end zone, which kind of saved his day. But it should be a little bit better here against the Cincinnati Bengals. They are a middle-of-the-pack defense. We saw what Devin Singletary did to them as well, so I do believe this could be a crazy game. Not only that, I do have Keaton Mitchell as a spot start. Look, he is kind of like the Devin A. Chain, however way you pronounce his name. I always get mixed up now ever since he's kind of changed it. But he's kind of like this high upside top play with minimal opportunity. I mean, you think about Seattle, 9 opportunities for 138 yards and a touchdown. You think about Cleveland when he only had 3 touches and a touchdown, but he had over 13 fantasy points. That is the type of hope and expectation that you hope coming into week 11 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I do have him as a spot start because they're probably going to be better options. Obviously, you may be struggling with bye weeks because of, like I said, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, Alvin Kamara, the list goes on, or maybe with some injuries. That's why I do have him as a spot start coming into this week. So definitely keep that in mind as we go into week 11. All right, the start of a 1 p.m. slate games. The first one is a little bit of a dud, but the Dallas Cowboys versus the Carolina Panthers. 41.5 is the over/under. If there is any glimmer of hope as a Giants fan that the Carolina Panthers could beat the Dallas Cowboys, I want it. I want it all, because if they do win this game, that means we hopefully get into that first spot in the NFL draft, but that is besides the point. Obviously, the Cowboys are favored coming into this game, and I know the biggest question I would say coming into this week is, what do we do with Tony Pollard? I mean, we did a live stream a little bit earlier today, and so we have so many questions about Tony Pollard. Can we trust him? What do we do? I know we have been saying this is the last straw. This is the best matchup. I mean, against the Giants in the week 10, that was supposed to be the best matchup because they did give up a top 10 amount of points to the running back position, but everyone else on that offense ate outside of Tony Pollard. Rico Dowell had a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Dak Prescott ran for a touchdown and threw for a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. Not only that, Michael Gallup. So this is the last straw for Tony Pollard. If Tony Pollard cannot find the double-digit numbers here going against the Carolina Panthers, I am not necessarily sure what we can do or how we're going to be moving forward with him. He might become a spot start or a risky spot going into this week. I think, even if you think of the matchup that I just talked about, you think of Gus Edwards going against the Cincinnati Bengals. I feel like right now, a lot of you guys are saying, I would rather start Gus Edwards based off what he has done. You would probably rather start Keaton Mitchell if you had the option of him or Tony Pollard just because of the upside. But look, you have to start Tony Pollard coming into this week purely because he is going against the Carolina Panthers, who gave up the second most points to the running back position. This is why this is the last straw. If he can do that, there can be a glimmer of hope, because he does have Carolina, Washington, Seattle. Then he has a tough one in Philly, Buffalo, who just gave a lot of points to Javonte Williams. Then he has Miami. There are some glimmer of hopes in the rest of his schedule. But if he does not produce in one of the best matchups here, then he might just be a risky to spot start moving forward. If he does get, I would say he has to feel confident to start for the rest of the season, in my opinion, if he gets at least 15 points. If he doesn't get 15 points, and based off the game script, then we might have to punt Tony Pollard. But on the other side of the ball here, Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, excuse me, I am not starting either one of them. Look, we haven't seen it. 9 carries for Chuba Hubbard against the Chicago Bears on that Thursday night game. It's not there. It's not happening. I don't think it's ever going to happen, unfortunately. And Miles Sanders, only 2 carries. No, thank you. So the only person I'm willing to start in this matchup in the backfield is Tony Pollard. Going into our next matchup here, good divisional game. Steelers at the Cleveland Browns. The over-under is 37.5 in favor of the Cleveland Browns. And starting off with the Steelers side of the ball here, as you can see, I have Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren both as risky starts. Why? It's because the Cleveland Browns currently give up the 7th least amount of points to the running back position. Now, that did fluctuate coming into this week after they gave up a decent amount of points to the running back position against the Baltimore Ravens. But I do believe I can easily see that fluctuating up and down, them being in the top 5 or even top 3 of giving up the least amount of fantasy points to the position. But look, I understand there's been some hope with Najee and Jaylen Warren. The last 3 games, specifically for Najee Harris, he has scored a touchdown the last 4 games, 14, 10 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points, 18 fantasy points for Najee Harris. I just don't see that happening here against the Cleveland Browns. And you can say the same thing with Jaylen Warren. Only 1 game under double-digit fantasy points, scored 2 touchdowns out of the last 4 games, 10, 17, 14, and 19. I'm just not sure if I am confident in starting them or confident in telling you to start them. That's why I do have them labeled here as risky starts. There are a lot of other opportunities and other running backs that you can be starting and should be starting over them after this matchup, specifically for this matchup, because, I would rather be starting Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford, obviously, on the other side, if you do have him, a James Cook, obviously, a Breece Hall. The list goes on. You can even talk about maybe Khalil Herbert or Deontay Foreman. You can talk about, A.J. Dillon. You can talk about Javonte Williams, Ty Chandler, Alexander Madison if he plays. Like, the list goes on when I think about the amount of people I would rather start if I did have a Najee Harris or a Jaylen Warren. Now, going to the Cleveland side of the ball here, you can see that I do have Kareem Hunt as a spot start. You can see that he is a goal line back. Unfortunately, he has scored a touchdown. What's crazy, he has scored a touchdown the last 5 weeks since he's been on this team. After the bye week in week 5, he's been on this team and has scored a touchdown in every single game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He scored 6 touchdowns in the last 5 games, which is absolutely crazy. So 16 fantasy points, 15, 13. But the last 2 weeks against the Cardinals, only 29% of the snap share. Against the Baltimore Ravens, only 36% of the snap share. Jerome Ford is still leading this backfield on the ground, but he's just not finding the end zone, which is a little bit frustrating. But I do have Jerome Ford as a must-start because he is the guy that is going to be getting the most opportunity here. And the Pittsburgh Steelers do give up the 10th most points to the running back position. So maybe it's not Kareem Hunt this week who finds the end zone. Maybe it's going to be Jerome Ford. So definitely keep that in mind going into week 11. Okay, going into our next matchup here, the Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions. Obviously, the Lions are favored here with 46.5. Hopefully, Justin Fields comes back into this game. And as I'm recording this video, I do not know if he's going to be back. Neither do I know if Khalil Herbert is going to be back. So definitely keep that in mind. I'm going to have a couple of different scenarios here. And let's start off with the Chicago Bears. Obviously, if Khalil Herbert plays, I think you're going to have to play him. Even though this is a tough matchup here against the Chicago Bears, you saw what Austin Eckler did this past week. Obviously, a completely different type of talent, completely different offense. But, anything can happen when you think of this opportunity, when you think of Khalil Herbert. He is clearly, I would say, the favorite back in this backfield. But this could be a three-headed monster, to be completely honest. We saw D'Onta Foreman obviously go crazy against the Carolina Panthers with 21 tokes on the ground, over 17 fantasy points. And Roscoe, getting the opportunities in the air, which we liked, caught 6 out of 4 targets. When Khalil Herbert comes in, it's just going to be a little bit jumbled. So I would say this: Khalil Herbert starts. Him and D'Onta Foreman are risky starts because it all depends on the reports going into this week. Is Khalil Herbert going to be 100%? He's going to be on a snap count? Because if he is, then it's going to be D'Onta Foreman. Now, if Khalil Herbert doesn't play, then that would move D'Onta Foreman to a risky start, which he still is, but Rashad Johnson to a risky start. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's not too confusing there. Obviously, stay tuned throughout the week as we know more information. But right now, I wouldn't be starting these guys with confidence. Just start whoever is. When Khalil Herbert's back, that's when you know which way you should pivot. Now, on the other side of the ball, obviously, the Detroit Lions have a two-headed monster here. I mean, Monty and Jahmyr Gibbs, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we hoped and expected from day one. The David Montgomery and DeAndre Swift type of feel, or Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift type of feel that we saw this past year. But, I mean, this is, I would argue, even better the way Monty is running the ball. I mean, 12 tokes over 116 yards. And then Jahmyr Gibbs also doing some crazy things as well. 14 tokes, averaging over 5.5 yards per carry, finds the end zone twice. So both of these guys are must start, so let's not overthink it there, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Once again, comment down below with any questions regarding this matchup. Khalil Herbert and D'Onta Foreman are risky starts, where Monty and Jahmyr Gibbs are must starts. Okay, going into our next matchup here, the Chargers at the Green Bay Packers. The Chargers are clearly favored coming into this game. 43.5 is the over-under. What's really good about this game is that both of these teams give up a lot of points to the running back position. So you hope and expect that there should be a good start and opportunity for both of these guys. Obviously, you start Austin Eckler on the other side, or on the Chargers side of the ball. 19 carries, 67 yards, and a touchdown. Caught 4 out of 7 targets, over 21 fantasy points this past week. You started with confidence. Now, the Green Bay Packers on Aaron Jones, who didn't have the game that we hoped and expected. 9 fantasy points against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were also up there. They gave the 10th most points to the running back position, and we hoped and expected them to have a better game. That wasn't the case. It just didn't look right. Obviously, the Steelers played a lot better defense if you were to watch that game. He didn't look very efficient. He was getting the opportunities in the air, which really saved his day. But he, once again, wasn't efficient on the ground. Who was efficient on the ground, was A.J. Dillon. 9 carries, 70 yards, 7.7 yards per carry. That's why I do have him as a risky start, because if you do need that depth, maybe you're in a 16, 18, 14-man league, I think A.J. Dillon could be somebody that you can be considering starting, hoping that this Chargers game is going to be a little bit easier for both of these guys to run versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, you have Khalil Mack, and the list goes on the defensive side of the ball for the Chargers, but this hopefully on paper and in the game could be a little bit easier for these running backs to run. So must start Austin Eckler. I would still have Aaron Jones as a must start and A.J. Dillon as a risky start going into this matchup. All right, continuing with the matchups here, obviously the Arizona Cardinals versus the Houston Texans. Hey, about C.J. Stroud, huh? Something special is happening with that guy. The Texans are favored 47.5 coming into this matchup. Starting off at the Arizona Cardinals side of the ball, James Conner is back. 16 tokes, 73 yards, just under 5 yards per carry. We saw 7 fantasy points. Wasn't on the field, for that big snap percentages as we hoped and expected. Hopefully he does get more workload. Maybe he gets into the 70% snap share coming into this week. But you start him with confidence. He's definitely going to be better as the games goes on. Now for the Houston Texans, this one's very interesting. Obviously, Dameon Pierce, if he is healthy, I do have both of these guys as risky starts. If he is healthy, I don't think you start him with confidence. But anything can happen with Dameon Pierce. That is the problem. This is why I have him as a risky start, because if you are struggling with injuries, if you're struggling with bye weeks, I understand why you have to start him, but I'm not confident in starting him. And I would say the same thing with Devin Singletary. Now you're saying, well, Devin Singletary had a career high 150 yards. I don't think that is something that's going to stay true. I don't think that is something that I don't see him. I mean, you don't go from 13 touches, 10 touches, 2 weeks before to 30 touches. to literally tripling your opportunity on the ground. You just don't. I just think it was just that game, the game script. He had a hot hand that week. Obviously, the Bengals lost a couple key players in their defensive side of the ball. And now you play in the Arizona Cardinals, who technically are worse. I completely agree. They give the third most points to the running back position. But I'm not expecting a 23-point type game. I'm not expecting 30 touches. I'm not even expecting double-digit touches or fantasy points. That is the type of outlook I have. This is why I think this is a risky start. This could be a trap. Even though they do give a lot of points, I'm not confident in starting him. I'm not confident in telling you to start him. Now, if you're telling me Devin Singletary or Ty Chandler, that's when we have a different conversation. If you're telling me Devin Singletary or Najee Harris or Jalen Warren, as we saw, who has won a tough matchup against the Cleveland Browns, we can have a conversation. But in this matchup, I'm still a little bit risky. I understand if you have to start him, but for me, I am not confident in telling you to start him. That's why I do have him as a risky start here. So hopefully that helps. Once again, comment down below with any questions, comments, and concerns regarding this matchup. Our next matchup, Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are favored. 40.5 is the over-under for this matchup. Derrick Henry, I do believe, is a must-start coming into this matchup. I know he had a bad game this past week. The Bucs are a really good defense against the run. They currently give the second least amount of points to the running back position. Now he's playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are a middle-of-the-pack defense. I do believe this is, this is a divisional game, and this is going to be a better outlook for Derrick Henry. So I'm believing for him to have a big bounce-back game. And what's really frustrating is that when they're down, before with Derrick Henry, whether it was last year, 2 years ago, whenever it was, specifically last year, when they were down, they still ran the ball. Now, when they're down, they result into throwing the ball, which is fair. I understand a new head coach, a new regime, a new quarterback, the list goes on. But Derrick Henry doesn't just lose his opportunity because he's older. He's not bad because he's older. He looks bad because he's not getting the same opportunity that he gets. You could be down, 2 scores a year ago, and Derrick Henry was still getting 30 touches, and he will be the reason that you win. He hasn't stopped being inefficient. He just stopped getting the opportunities. And when you're telling me, yeah, he's inefficient when he gets 11 carries, well, no duh. Because if he gets 20 carries and he breaks off like he always has, he's better. And I don't think anyone has done the math where they take away Derrick Henry's big runs and see how efficient he is. That will take forever. That's why he is such a good running back when you give him more and more opportunity. Anyways, I'm going a little rant. You start Derrick Henry. Tajay Spears, I'm not starting him. I think he could be a spot star. I get it. He got 10 points because they were down. He got 4 out of 5 opportunities this past week, okay? On the Jags side of the ball, Travis Etienne did have a fluke game, one of his lowest scoring games this year, but he was against the San Francisco 49ers, coming off a bye week, coming off a game that they really needed to win. They held him to only 6 points, 9 tokes. He also wasn't even part of the game, I would say, in the middle of the fourth quarter or early in the fourth quarter, because that's how bad they were losing. But you do start him with confidence here, as the Titans are in middle of a pack defense. So Derrick Henry and Travis Etienne are the only 2 guys I'm starting in this matchup. Okay, our next matchup here, Raiders at the Miami Dolphins. Over-under is 47.5 here. The Miami Dolphins are favored coming into this week. And going on the Raiders side of the ball, obviously Josh Jacobs, you start him with confidence. He had his most tokes on the ground so far this year with 27 over 116 yards, or 100 yards, which is 116 yards, 11 fantasy points. Didn't find the end zone, but you start him with confidence. Now on the Miami Dolphins side of the ball, you start Devon and Raheem with confidence. Devon's coming back. He's been practicing off of IR. He has that window to return. There have been reports saying that he's going to return in week 11, and if he does, I will be starting Devon A-Chain. And Raheem Mostert, I do believe he is better with Devon on the field, which will give him a little bit of better opportunity to have a higher upside. Now, I know he has been a little bit of a dud these past couple weeks and hasn't been these home run hitting guy, but he's still RB2 on the season, and maybe that was because his 45-point game. But you start him with confidence because the Raiders do give up the 8th most points to the running back position. So you start Josh Jacobs, Devon, and Raheem Mostert going into this matchup. All right, the last 1 p.m. slate game here is my beloved Giants versus the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are favored coming into this game, 36.5, and let's not waste any let's not waste too much time on this matchup. Saquon Barkley, I know a lot of people are concerned, but you still start him. I mean, you look at what he did against the Dallas Cowboys. He had some really crazy runs, over 5 yards per carry. He was toking the ball. This offense is just bad. And I don't know if they give him the ball like they did against the New York Jets, where they just gave him 36 carries, or they get a little bit creative. I think they're starting to understand what Tommy DeVito can do. And against the Washington Commanders, who is a divisional rival, this could be the game where you could be a little bit surprised. I still am starting Saquon Barkley because he is a stud coming into this week. Now, on the Washington Commanders side of the ball, Brian Robinson is a must-start coming in. I mean, 27 points this past week, called 6 out of 6 for over 100 yards and a touchdown. My guy was bowling out, but my Giants do give up the 9th most fantasy points to the running back position. So you start Brian Robinson with confidence here. Now, Antonio Gibson, I have him as a risky start. Like, for a good example is like Antonio Gibson or someone like Keaton Mitchell. You're starting Keaton Mitchell, right? Someone like a Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard. I think I could be starting Antonio Gibson over him. You get what I'm saying? Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren, as we were having the conversations a little bit earlier. But for me, Antonio Gibson, a risky start here. 2 back-to-back games over double-digit fantasy points versus New England, 12 fantasy points, versus Seattle, 16 fantasy points. Let's see if he does it again this week as they're utilizing him in the air. 5 games this past week where he's caught 5 targets in the air, or 5 opportunities. So week 8 against Philly, he caught 5 out of 5 targets. Week 9 against New England, caught 5 out of 5 targets. Week 10 against Seattle, caught 5 out of 6 targets. So he's getting those opportunities in the air. So Saquon Barkley, Brian Robinson is a must start, and Antonio Gibson a risky start coming into week 11. The start of our afternoon slate games here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are clearly favored. 44.5 is the over-under in this game. I think this should be a good game. Actually, Baker Mayfield's kind of been cooking it. The defense for the Bucs have been playing somewhat decent. Let's see what can happen. I mean, the 49ers are just a really good team overall. Rachaad White, you start RB8 on the season so far. I would say arguably his toughest matchup coming into this year. Obviously, he played the Philadelphia Eagles earlier, so I think this is his second toughest matchup coming into this year. But these last 4 games, he has been bowling out 15, 17, 27, and 17 fantasy points this past week, getting peppered in the air. I mean, he has been averaging just nearly over 45 yards in the last 4 games in the air specifically. So he is doing his thing. I know it's a tough matchup. You still start him with confidence here. CMC, you start him with confidence. Let's not overthink it. He is tied with the record. They tried to get him the record. That wasn't the case. Still RB1. He is doing his thing. So Rachaad White and CMC, you are starting in these matchups. All right, going into our next matchup here, great divisional game. Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Bills just lost to the Denver Broncos, and that is pretty crazy in my personal opinion. 40.5 is the over-under. Obviously, the Bills are favored coming into this game here. Breece Hall is a must-start coming in. Obviously, it's been a middle-of-the-pack thing for Breece Hall. 10 fantasy points these last couple games, but you have to hope that Zach Wilson and this offense gets a little bit better. They're kind of a middle-of-the-pack defense right now for the Buffalo Bills. I do believe it does get better for the New York Jets here. I mean, rumors is that Aaron Rodgers is coming back here, so keep that in mind. By the way, I did say middle of the pack. They actually give the 11th most points to the running back position, as I am seeing right now. They have kind of a couple updates came through regarding that game here as I'm recording it after the Monday night game. So keep that in mind here. Breece Hall, you start with confidence, and James Cook on the other side of the ball. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I am a massive James Cook believer. I do not believe that anyone here would say the Buffalo Bills are better when they run the ball with James Cook. When you don't run the ball, that forces Josh Allen to do things that he shouldn't do. James Cook, clearly, he made a couple mistakes. He fumbled the ball in the first drive of the game, and then they benched him essentially for the whole first quarter. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. Yes, Latavius Murray broke out for one or two runs, but it wasn't anything else after that. When James Cook comes in, the first play, my guy gets a first down. Another 6 to 7 yard carry. He had 12 carries for over 100 yards, 9 yards per carry. He is one of the most efficient running backs on the ground. He just needs to get the opportunity. They need to run the ball. And the Jets currently, at the moment, give up the 12th most points to the running back position. I am going to be beside myself if he doesn't go off against the Jets, in my personal opinion. The last time he played, obviously, it was week 1, and we saw how that game kind of panned out with Aaron Rodgers tearing his ACL, caught 6 out of 4 targets for James Cook, but he should be the one that should be toking the ball on the ground. He is a must start for me still. I know these last couple games have been disappointing, so keep that in mind. So Breece Hall and James Cook are both must-starts coming into this matchup. Going into our next matchup here, Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams here. Seahawks are favorite coming into this game. 44.5 is the over/under. Starting at the Seahawks side of the ball, I know a lot of people are questioning Kenneth Walker. Yes, that one catch saved his game. Over 19 fantasy points he had this past week, but I do believe he's still a must-start coming into this game. I am going to say that Zach Charbonnet now turns to a risky start, or somebody that you could be starting if you are in a deeper league, because it looks like he's going to be getting more and more opportunity here. Caught 4 out of 5 passes. This is one thing I would say about Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker's situation. The last 3 games that they have played, this offense has struggled against the Cleveland Browns, against the Baltimore Ravens, and against the Washington Commanders. Excuse me. When you watch the Washington Commanders game, they struggled to move the ball down the field. They struggled to throw the ball. They struggled to run the ball, whether that was with Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet. At times, yes, you had Zach Charbonnet break out for 1 or 2 big runs. The same thing with Kenneth Walker. But overall, they struggled to move the ball these last 3 games. Now against the Rams, I'm going to be predicting that it's going to be, I would say the next 3 games, I'm going to be predicting that they're going to be struggling to move the ball, which is going to make things a little bit difficult and shaky coming around in the Seattle Seahawks backfield. But Kenneth Walker is a must start, and Zach Charbonnet is a risky start. Now going to the Rams side of the ball here, Kyren Williams still not back. He should be back in week 12, so keep that in mind. But Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman, to me, are both spot starts here, as the Seattle Seahawks give up the 5th most amount of fantasy points to the running back position. We've seen both of these guys find the end zone at some point in their starts in the last 3 weeks. So I both have them as spot starts going into week 11. Okay, going into our Sunday night matchup, Vikings at the Denver Broncos here. Over under is 42.5, and the Broncos are favored coming into this game. Russ is cooking. He's starting to look like himself, so that's going to be really exciting. And so is Josh Dobbs. Doesn't matter what team he's on, he is going to do his thing. Now, starting at the Viking side of the ball here, Alexander Mattison obviously is going to be questionable coming into this game. He's in concussion protocol. If he does clear it, you start him. That's why I have him as a spot start. He's a must start if he plays. He's a spot start as the season or as this week progresses. Same thing with Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler is currently a spot start, but I would say these guys are going to be must start if one or the other doesn't play. So, for example, if Alexander Mattison plays, he's a must start. If Alexander Mattison doesn't play, Ty Chandler is a must-start. So keep that in mind. That's why I have mass spot starts coming into this week. And we saw the juice with Ty Chandler. 15 opportunities on the ground, scored a touchdown, over 10 fantasy points against New Orleans. There is opportunity here for Ty Chandler if Alexander Mattison doesn't play. So keep that in mind. Javonte Williams looks like the old Javonte Williams of yesteryear. 21 tokes, 79 yards, caught 4 out of 4 and a touchdown, 21 fantasy points. Javonte Williams is back, baby. So if you do need him in dynasty perspective, go out and trade for him. He is the guy. They're utilizing him. He is getting the carries and opportunities. And everyone else on this team, I am not going to be starting. One of the biggest things I don't think I've mentioned, if I did, I'll mention again, the Broncos do give up the most points to the running back position. This is why Ty Chandler and Alexander Mattison are going to be must starts coming into this game if one or the other doesn't play. So keep that in mind as you go into this matchup. All right, and Monday Night Football, the cream of the crop, Super Bowl repeat, Eagles at the Kansas City Chiefs here. Over under is 46.5. Whatever fantasy players you have in this contest, you want to start in any capacity. Okay. You start DeAndre Swift with confidence here. You start Isaiah Pacheco with confidence here. And the one player that I did want to talk about is Jet McKinnon. Usually what happens is that Jet McKinnon normally shines when this team is struggling. Okay. And I kind of patting myself on the back here and saying, you know what, like I kind of told you so. But the last time I said Jet McKinnon, you should start him because of how good this team is and how good they can score against the Kansas City Chiefs was against the Miami Dolphins. Now, he wasn't somebody that got a crazy opportunity. He only had 25% of the snap share, only had 3 opportunities that was given to him. But what does he do? He finds the end zone with one of those opportunities, and he has scored over 10 fantasy points. I do believe this could be a game where they abandon the run game. Why? I'm talking about Isaiah Pacheco and they abandoned that run game. It's because the Philadelphia Eagles give up the least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. So what do? They get creative. They start, throwing some Texas routes, some out routes for Jet McKinnon, whatever the case may be. They get him in motion. Those are the type of things that I'm going to be seeing and looking out for this game. So if you're in the 14, 16, 18, or even bigger leagues, Jet McKinnon, I believe, could be a risky start, but somebody that I'm excited to start just based off the matchup. Now, if you're in a 12 league or less, I am not starting Jet McKinnon, but I am going to be starting Isaiah Pacheco. I know Pacheco hasn't been up, in the last couple games. He's kind of been up and down, right? These last 2 games scored less than 6 fantasy points. He's still carrying the tote pretty well. 5 yards per carry, just over 4 yards per carry against Miami. I think he will be better, so keep that in mind here. DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco must start, and a risky start going in for Jet McKinnon. Hopefully that helps. Over 45 running backs we spoke about today you should be starting or sitting going into week 11 of the fantasy football season. If we didn't answer any of your questions, join us on the live stream, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every single day. We're going to be answering and setting up your lineups going into each and every week, leading up to the playoffs till the season is over. We appreciate each and every one of you guys, and as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.